Hi, this is Karen from San Francisco.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles. And welcome to Movies That Shaped Us, a journey of self-discovery through a shared love of film. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies. We hope these movies and topics are fun and revelatory to you, just like they've been to us. So, Karan, why don't you let our listeners know our topic for today?
All right, so our topic today is movies that shaped our experiences at school. So this is obviously back to school time.
Yep.
Which is why we figured that this would be a good topic. Obviously, I can speak for both of us that, our school experiences and lives spent in any sort of educational institution has been pivotal to who we are today, our relationships, finding ourselves, all of that. So this is a pretty meaty topic to get into, but just for some context. So I went to, obviously, school in India. Then I went to undergrad in India as well. Then I went to grad school here in California. Spent a pretty major part of my life in some form or the other studying and being with other people
Students
that I didn't know.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I agree. This is definitely a pretty big topic, and was fun to kind of go back and relive the old school days as they were. So I grew up in Boston and went to a all boys private high school. I guess it was 7 through 12, so it was like middle school and high school. Dress code, whole nine.
Oh.
And then after graduated from there, went to Los Angeles to go to college at a large private university, and then also did grad school in LA too. So it's been a lot of school for sure, and then a lot of time been in school, a lot of time thinking of school, a lot of, you said, people I met, experience I've had that it was fun to think back to the movies that either were reminding me of that or that I watched during those times that was like, oh, this is exactly what it felt like to be in college or to be in high school. So yeah, it was fun topic.
Yeah, no, pretty exciting. I guess one thing I should mention is that since my dad was in the army, we moved a lot. And so that's kind of a big part of my school experience. And I also went to primarily army schools. So these were schools that had some or the other connection from like a funding or administration standpoint with the military in India. So,
oh, okay.
I mean, not that, we were doing like army style obstacle courses or drills, but we did have uniforms. So yeah.
So you moved around to a lot of schools, I'm assuming then. Like
Also
you were always changing schools. And
Yep.
were these schools then only made up of other children of people in the military?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And when you say uniforms, were they like tie and jacket like me, or you mean actually like fatigues, army fatigues?
No,
both?
tie and jacket.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted you to say uniform. You're in the military. I don't know what that means.
That would have been fun, actually, or maybe not.
I don't know. I'm surprised you didn't have to put in like those military movies are always in like the dress whites or something like that. That's how I imagine when you said uniforms, all you guys lined up in your dress whites, like at a Top Gun or something. But
yeah, I know. I was just gonna say, here comes Maverick. No,
yeah.
that was not the case. All right then. Well, what is your number 3?
Yeah, so my number 3 is a college film. So I'll start with college, maybe going backwards then. So my college film is PCU, film from 1994. This is directed by Hart Bochner, starring Jeremy Piven, Chris Young, Megan Ward, Jon Favreau, David Spade, and Jessica Walters. It's a pretty stacked cast there. Plot summary from IMDb: a high school senior visits college for the weekend and stays at the wildest house on campus. So this is a film that I actually watched a lot on cable TV when I was in high school, and it helped sort of give me an impression of what college might be like in terms of what it was like to be on college, what college campuses were like. So this film really kind of set a idea in my head, at least, of what that was actually like. And I actually ended up going to a school very different than the one depicted in this film. So this film takes place in a looks like a liberal arts school in like Connecticut or Rhode Island or something is kind of the vibe they have there, which is a lot of the schools I was looking at as well, and thought, oh, maybe I'd end up at a school like that, but ended up going to a large university. But why I think this film actually speaks to me in a lot of different levels too is what it captures, for me at least, what it was actually like to be in college, or at least the memories I have of college, the moments that I think back to. So this film takes place over like one day. So it's a kid, a high school senior coming in, looking around and seeing, kind of like thinking about visiting the school. So again, I kind of felt, just a little preppy kid coming in, jumped in and seeing what college is like. So identified a lot with that character as a high school student.
Mm.
But as he's going around the campus, he's, seeing all the different, groups of social cliques around school, seeing what it's like to kind of like live in these dormitory slash fraternity houses. So all of this stuff that that he sees here, none of it is actually academic. So it's not like there's any scenes that take place in a classroom and there's people
No.
talking about, oh, like I have to cram for this exam, or there's a really funny side plot of a guy who's doing his thesis on this thing called like the Kane Hackman theory, where there's why is there always a movie like on TV at any time that's either starring Michael Caine or Gene Hackman? It's like that kind of funny stuff. So there's references to those things, but there's nothing academic. It's all just a bunch of people kind of like hanging around with their friends, chilling. And that is actually what, for me, the college memories I have, it's not of what I learned in school or remembering back to a particular class or a teacher or some big moment in terms of academics. It's a lot of this hanging around, talking to my friends, doing crazy stuff, going to some parties, but more often than not, just kind of like hanging around. And I think what this movie does is captures a lot of like these students in the film are just hanging around, and the really thing that they're trying to do is like save their dormitory by just planning a big party. So it's the thrust of this film is actually nothing to do with academics. And again, like for me, that actually is not what I remember at least about college. I mean, yeah, I took classes and earned a diploma and everything, but it's not like those are the things that I look back on fondly or the things I feel like actually shaped who I am. It's more about the people I met and the stuff that the people I hung out with and all the different things that I did in the school. So it's more about the people, which is what in this movie is basically the focus of it. And definitely there's a lot of truth to there's a line in the film that I think is definitely this is what college is about, especially freshman year, where Jeremy Piven, who's the senior, or maybe he's been there I think 7 years, he says, is talking to the pre-freshman and saying, okay, this is college, so beer, it's your best friend, drink a lot of it. Classes, nothing before 11. Girls, you're a freshman, out of the question. Do you have a car? And the kid's like, no. He's like, okay, great. Find someone on your floor who has a car and be friends with them. It's like, actually, that really just is the best advice you can give to any
Pretty true.
college freshman. I mean, for sure, because I came to school without a car, and it's in LA, so you have to find someone with a car. So that was definitely like a bit of advice that I heard too. So I'm like, oh, this is exactly what it was like. And then two, I think what this film does, in a comedic way, is it sort of shows that, yeah, part of being in college is you meet a lot of different people who you never would have met or hung out with in high school, but that these people do, like, you start to form kind of cliques and groups where, yeah, like you came to school and maybe you never be exposed to this kind of person, but you hang out with the people that are your people. I was a film nerd, so I hung out with all the other film nerds, even though, there are other types of personalities and different cliques that are on my campus, but eventually kind of gravitate to those sort of isolated communities, essentially. And this film satirizes that with having all the womanists, they're called, so like the feminists together and like the gays together and the African American, like Black Power people together, and the ones who care about the environment. Like they kind of make fun of that, but that is a lot of what I at least found in college, where after especially freshman year, you start finding your group and you stick with your clique, and that's sort of how you then go through the rest of college. So I think that's why the movie's very silly. I still find it very funny and fun to watch, but those are really the things to me that spoke to me as someone who was in high school looking at college. I could see myself through the protagonist, and then the fact that college is basically just a bunch of hanging around, or at least that was the things that I remember, at least, are just a bunch of hanging around and just chilling and having a good time. So yeah, it's PCU.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd never seen or heard of this movie before, but I was very glad that I watched it. It just was a great time just watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything you said resonates with me as well. Like when I look back at my college days specifically, I just remember all the dumb shit we did.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
basically that. And the stuff that wasn't dumb shit at the time, because it felt really important. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we are in a whatever clique or whatever group you're in, you're doing something, a project or what have you. And and of course, in hindsight, it probably was all dumb shit. But in the moment, it felt like, oh, this is very important. Like this is all
Yeah.
I live by, and I'll get to that in one of my picks.
Hmm.
But the thing that struck me was I actually two things. One, I was kind of envious of the protagonist's journey of kind of visiting school and seeing
Mm.
what it feels like, which I know is a very common thing to do in the US.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have that sort of stuff.
Oh, interesting.
You sort of applied and you got in, and that's what you could go and, sit in classes, but it's not something that people really did.
Oh, interesting.
I wasn't aware of that. And then, of course, moving here for grad school, I'd never even been to the US, which is still crazy. And I think about it, that I just showed up 2 days before grad school started, in a brand
Wow.
new country, which I would not recommend to really anybody. But I mean, I guess it worked out.
Right, right,
But
right.
at that, when I was there, I was like, oh yeah, have you been here before? Like, yeah, yeah, we were here like months ago,
Hmm.
with family, walking around, experiencing what it might feel like. So I don't know, it kind of reminded me of my feelings of feeling envious and kind of missing out
Mm.
on that experience, so that you're not really there, but you can still experience what life looks like, which,
Hmm.
I think is pretty valuable. So I kept thinking about that. And then the second thing was like how relevant all the cliques and the movements that they talk about are in society right now,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's
yeah, yeah.
almost like all these cliques and movements have sort of taken a much bigger shape outside of just colleges and educational institutions into our mainstream society.
Hmm.
That's sort of what the online dialogue looks like,
Hmm.
that everybody is sort of in their own, I don't want to use the word clique, but in their own kind of movement that they are passionate about, and they're driving all things, everything about that. And then there's all this interesting, conversation and drama that erupts because of different groups kind of colliding. So I thought that was very interesting and relevant. It almost felt like this movie was written today,
Yeah, yeah.
and then it sort of, brought up those thoughts that, I mean, maybe uniting for, a big party to save your dom is probably a very simplistic notion. But it did make me think that ultimately people are people. You start your journey with some sort of isolated view of who you are, the clique you hang out with. But when you have moments like the party
Hmm.
in the movie where you do hang out with each other, ultimately people aren't that different, and there's
Right.
always something that you can connect with each other. So yeah, I don't know if they were going for that kind of, larger sort of moral story or what have you from the movie, but it did land on me like that. And maybe it's something that if I had watched during my college days, would have been more open perhaps to. And I think I was let me take that back. I was not the click person,
Hmm.
actually, not in college, definitely not in grad school. I moved through lots of different circles.
Hmm.
I never sort of really signed up for one thing only. So,
Hmm.
but this movie kind of reminded me of the power of that, and made me feel like, oh, maybe I should have done more of this. Maybe I should have reached out to even more people who felt maybe more extremely different to
Hmm.
me and found common ground. So I don't know, I had a lot of good fun watching it, but it also was thought provoking, which I was not expecting this movie to be.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a speech that Jeremy Piven gives. So when they throw this
Yeah.
party at their house, everyone then goes out and protests. So there's all the different cliques protesting outside for various reasons. And he gives a speech to like his people, like, look, we're all the same. We're young. We have raging hormones. Like they want to party too.
Yeah.
They're protesting, but it's a cry for help. And they want us like feed us drinks, get us laid, give us a good time. Like he gives that speech, which is fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like interesting too, like watching this movie, like now, just as you said, in this culture that is even more like bifurcated and balkanized, or however we want to call it, especially with the social issues thing. That what I do like about this movie, to analyze it on a political level, is that the administration is the bad guy. So like Jessica Walters is the administration. And all these college movies, it's always because after Animal House, they always have to fight the administration.
Yeah.
But what the administration is doing is they're purposely sowing divisions between these groups. Oh, if you're
Yep.
offended, fill out this form. Hate your fellow student,
Yep.
right? And at the end, they all get together to have solidarity. And our common class here is student.
Yeah.
Forget the fact that you're the hippie one and you're the pothead one and you're the jock one. Forget that. We're going to fight the administration and slash the conservative. I like how the conservatives are also the villains too, like the white fraternity of the David Spade. Like they're not part of this class solidarity. They're the ones being fought against. So there is this message of like, hey, to defeat the administration, to defeat the conservatives, you have to band together, put aside your differences, find that commonality, and then that's how you win. So I do really like the political message of this film too.
Yeah.
But it's very fun.
I totally agree. All the preppy conservative fraternity guys would sort of join, the masses, because that would have sort of felt more real. Because people are people. You find crazy people everywhere, but that would have been kind of a fun thing to see.
Sure, though,
like the dumb one from that group.
Who gets hit in the balls at the end?
Right,
that guy. Yeah. But see, I actually kind of like, because they were part of the problem too, in a way.
They were.
Because they didn't see themselves as they saw themselves above everyone else. And that's why I do actually like that the film is saying, no, that's wrong too. You cannot join us. You're not, you're getting chased out by everyone else at the end, like David Spade is. But it's a very fun movie. Very quotable. Just one of my favorite lines in any movie is when Piven is talking to Jon Favreau and he's like about to go to this concert. He's wearing the name of the band on his shirt. He's like, you're wearing the name of the band on your shirt to the concert you're going to go to. Don't be that guy. Like, I still quote that all the time. And anytime I see someone at a concert wearing the shirt of the band that I'm at, I'm like, you're being that guy. Don't be that guy. Anyway, it's a great film. Glad you liked it. What's your number 3?
All right. So my number 3 is Legally Blonde from 2001, starring Reese Witherspoon, Luke Wilson, Selma Blair, Jennifer Coolidge, directed by Robert Luketic. And the quick logline on the movie is, which I'm sure everybody's aware of, Elle Woods, a fashionable sorority queen, is dumped by her boyfriend. She decides to follow him to law school. While she's there, she figures out that there is more to her than just looks. Okay, so I put this movie on my list because it kind of reminded me a little bit of my grad school experience. So I guess, I'm going in, I don't know what order I'm going in.
Opposite order too. Yeah, or you're starting with grad school. Yeah.
Opposite order, I guess.
Yeah.
But there are some other themes that ring true from this movie on other parts of my college life as well. But for grad school specifically, like I said a little bit earlier, sort of showing up to a brand new country, in a brand new place, and not having much idea of what it's going to be like. All you know is all you're bringing to this new place and new experiences, your gusto and almost, your foolish ambition or foolish excitement, if you will. I mean, that's all you have. I'm not knocking that. Like, that's all you have at that time in your life. So
right.
That's all you bring. And then when you get there, you realize, oh, I don't even know why I'm here actually, or how the hell did I get in here? Because everybody seems so on it and sharp and smart. And even though I have been smart so far in my life, I suddenly feel kind of dumb and a little bit out of place. And I think there's as kids, you feel out of place in many different contexts, but I think feeling out of place in the grad school context when you are a little bit older, I think lands on one in a different way, because you at that point are supposed to have figured shit out. You've been living your life in a certain way, and and if you've been lucky to have been afforded opportunities to do well, you kind of get accustomed to that. And then in some ways, grad school can be a bit of a humbling experience, and especially if you layer that in with moving to a different country and being totally new, there are just other layers to parse through. So I think the beginning part of the movie, not the breakup and her following the boyfriend, but just her showing up at law school, like really rings true with me on that, on those feelings. But then also, how she finds her own voice and confidence. And a big part of that is kind of just the friends she makes, and friends she makes in unexpected places. Like, I think the Jennifer Coolidge character at the salon is critical to her arc. I don't think you have Elle Woods' journey if she does not meet this other person who makes her feel is supported but also wanted. It's a
Exactly.
bit of a reminder that, oh no, Al, you got your shit in under control. You
Hmm.
are worth something, because she's providing value to Jennifer Coolidge's life in a way, right? So I think that's very important. And I was very lucky to meet people, in my time, especially in the first quarter, people who I didn't know, but people who maybe saw me for who I was, but for whatever reason supported me, appreciated me. And I think those conversations, those casual encounters went a long way and helped me sort of find my own voice. And so yeah, I think all of that rings true really well. I would also call out, the fact that she comes to school or law school is because she's following or chasing this boyfriend who dumped her. It always reminds me, this is not so much true for me in the case of grad school, but in general, falling in love, or what you think is love, really, in your school days is a big part of a school experience. So it reminded me of all the dumb
Hmm.
crushes I had during
Mm.
my college days, and most of them were actually, they're not really headed in the right direction. They were
Hmm.
there because you kind of get swept up in the whole ecosystem of, oh, someone is with somebody, and what does that mean, and so it's not, sometimes people do find people, but
Hmm.
at least in my experience, that was not the case. So this movie also reminds me of that a little bit. um but yeah, otherwise, iconic movie. There's not much more I can add. It rings true and keeps sort of evolving as time goes on, and is sort of evergreen, even though it's silly, but there's something about what the movie's trying to say. But really, Reese Witherspoon and her performance, I think that kind of carries this movie through. So yeah, that's Legally Blonde, my number three.
Yeah, this is a film I really like a lot as well. I remember seeing it for the first time back when it came out, and it definitely
Mm,
was one of those movies that I really like, where it's sort of a sleeper hit, like a little movie that could, like, no one ever thought this thing would turn into some major hit. Reese was still a young star who
yep.
hadn't really made it really at that point. Like, she'd been in a couple things that she was a rising star, but this sort of cemented her, matinee status. So yeah, I really really like this film. I think a lot of it does come down to her performance, but also her character. Like, she's
Yeah.
playing a blonde, but not a dumb blonde. And it's her blondness, for lack of a better word, and her knowledge of all these things, about fashion in the first scene to prevent some shop girl from overcharging her for something. But at the end, she wins the court case because of her knowledge,
Hmm.
as a blonde, right? In terms of her hair care and everything. And so she's staying true to who she is, and she's still able to be successful. And she's not ever letting anyone put a fast one over on her. Like, she's very, very smart, even though she might come off as kind of ditzy. She, is very sure of herself. She's also very forgiving. I mean, I love how,
Hmm.
Selma Blair is very mean to her throughout the whole movie, but, she forgives her and lets her in and
Hmm.
is a friend with her at the end. Like, she's not someone who holds grudges or is really mean. She's got a really good heart and a good
Hmm.
soul. And to see her succeed in this, in the film is really, like, rewarding because of that. Like, she didn't have to change who she was. She just kept being who she is, and that's gave her the success. She's able to be, a blonde and a lawyer, which is what the movie's sort of saying. Like, you can't do
I
this,
know
but
you can't do both,
yeah, but
but oh well,
you can. You
I
totally
can.
can. She proved that. So yeah, this is a film that I think is still really fun, really holds up well. I hadn't seen it in a while. It's fun to rewatch. Actually, I totally forgot Luke Wilson was even in it.
Yeah.
Sort of maybe speaks to his screen presence more than it does anything else. But yeah, the other thing too, that this movie for me will always represent college in a personal way. So like I said, I came to LA for college, went to University of Southern California, and it was in my first month of college, they filmed this movie on campus,
Oh.
to double as Harvard. And I remember in a Sunday morning walking across campus and seeing the scene where she pulls up to Harvard in, like, her little Porsche, and, like, the dog jumps out and she picks him up. I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh, we're here, in, like, moving van. And I basically watched them film that scene for like an hour and a half. It was just endlessly, like, her driving up, getting out, picking up the dog, reset the scene. So, like, this movie always will remind me of my freshman year of college because I saw them film the scene there. So
That's
I was like, oh,
amazing.
nice, Legal LeBron. Like that would a movie I would have put on my list in a very like personal, like superficial way. So I'm glad you did it for other ways, so I could at least mention that to me this is a movie that reminds me of my college days to this day still. Sequel not as good, unfortunately, but I hear they're
No.
trying to make a third one, so maybe they're able to rescue the franchise. But this movie's still so enjoyable and hits on all the things that you said too. I think a lot of this stuff reminded me as well in terms of the class structure and the Socratic method and all that of what business school was like too, which is always fun to kind of make fun of how silly that really is at the end of the day.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. No, and I love what you said about kind of she doesn't have to change herself. She just has to hone in on that. And I think that's so key. And especially when you in the grad school environment, when you are, a little bit older,
Right.
you have shaped yourself in a certain way. And when you come to a new place like this, it's very easy to succumb to the pressures of that, oh, I need to evolve into something that I'm not, which doesn't mean that you don't grow. Of course you grow and you expand your horizon, but you do that on whatever you're standing tall on, that is your superpower. And I think this movie, that's kind of the core of why this movie lives on, is because it's very empowering,
Yes, totally.
So, and everybody can see themselves in this character. And like you said, very important that this character is not a jerk, because often people who are smart and are finding their voices and or are standing tall on who they are, they're often jerks to other people, but she's super kind and just a good person. So yeah, I'm glad this is on the list.
Yeah, me too. I always enjoy talking about this film. It's really really a fun one.
All right, what is your number two?
So my number two, to bridge the Reese Witherspoon filmography gap, is 1999's Election. Directed by Alexander Payne, starring Matthew Broderick, Reese Witherspoon, as we just talked about, and Chris Klein. The plot of this film is a high school teacher meets his match in an overachieving student politician. So for me, I think this movie, which I saw when I was in high school, I saw when it came out, it really captures, I think, this feeling that you do sometimes have in high school where everything is like life or death important. Everything is heightened here. Stakes are incredibly high, and you care so much about everything that gets done. Even though in actuality, like, it's completely meaningless. I mean, there's nothing more unimportant in a way than the things that happen to you in high school. Like, I mean, yeah, there can be some big things, but it's not, compared to the rest of your life, I think those can be over heightened, especially at the time. So what this movie does is it uses the prism of a school presidential election to show how much drama and, again, self-seriousness of some of the students and really, like, quote unquote politics, right? They're involved in the high school experience. I think this movie does, speaking of clicks, again, like I mentioned, PCU does a great job with the narrative structure of having sort of several characters giving voiceovers. You really get to see into all the different types of stereotypes or personas, I guess, that you find in high school. There's the overachiever who Reese Witherspoon plays, Tracy Flick, and for her, everything is the most important thing ever that can happen in high school, because that's some step that you're one more step closer to some goal that you have when you're like 45, and this is my life that I want, and I'm sort of building towards that, and every misstep I make in high school could ruin that dream. So there definitely were people like that. I was surrounded by a lot of those in my high school experience, for sure, where everything was life or death. There's Chris Klein, who's first on-screen role. He was found for this film by Alexander Payne. Fantastic performance of just like this, dumb but harmless jock character, who sort of gets the drift for life and nothing. He never really has to try at anything. He just gets given it because he's popular and nice. He's nice. He's not a bad guy and good looking. There are definitely a lot of folks like that in high school that I met. And then his adopted sister, she's sort of this rebel who has a nihilistic attitude of like, oh, everything sucks, I hate everything. And that's definitely something as a teenager you feel at various points. And there were definitely people in my high school that were represented that. So I think what this movie does is not only shows those characters, but gives you empathy to all of them, because you're hearing from their own narration and internal thoughts. You're understanding, oh, okay, well, Chris Klein just actually kind of oblivious to these things. He's not a bad guy. Or, okay, Tracy might be crazy and, might take things a little bit too far, but you understand where she's coming from emotionally. So it puts you in the mindsets of all these different people, where in high school, you're so self-centered. All you're thinking about is yourself. You might, look at the overachiever and be like, oh, like, this teacher's pet, blah blah blah. What does this person actually try? Like, they're so annoying, they're doing this, but you really get to understand where these people are coming from in this film, which I think is just a brilliant like narrative device, and just a testament to the actors too, of really like living in these characters. You do feel like they're totally totally real. And I think you know, again, the casting here is so realistic. The school setting is real. There's a verisimilitude of just, it feels like you're back in high school in a classic sense. So, you know, I think, again, testament to Alexander Payne for casting real high school students like Chris Klein. And then all the background actors are mainly just like kids. They're not actual actors. I also think, you know, the staff, Matthew Broderick, I'm not going to talk about him too much in this analysis here, but he does a fantastic job.
He's great.
I think his best actually on-screen performance, and a lot of the interesting things. There's so much going on in this movie, but I'm focusing on the academic side just for the sake of the theme for the episode. But I definitely want to shout him out. But I also feel that the other administrators, especially the principal, is just so accurate in terms of how principals act. This is the scene where they're giving all the speeches of the who wants to run for high school president, and the audience is kind of like, you know, making fun of the speeches, and, you know, the principal gets up and says, "Hey, you know, if you guys can't act like adults, then we're going to treat you like children, because that's what you are. You are children." And like, that thing was said so many times in high school by teachers, or like, you know, because you're still kids, but you're trying to act kind of like adults. Sometimes they're trying to treat you like adults. So that line too, I was like, this is so real. It's like ripped from, you know, my high school experience. So again, I think what this movie really captures is all the different social cliques, but getting you to understand where these people are coming from, and understand more than even I did in high school in running into these different types of personas. That is just still just it's a masterwork of a film, and one of my favorite films of all time. And maybe it just hit me at the right time. Like, I was a senior in high school when I saw it, when it came out. But Election just had to include it on the list. And another fantastic Reese Witherspoon performance. Again, I think it's her best actually. But going from this and Legally Blonde to like a year or two later, it just shows her range as well as an actress.
Pretty amazing.
She's phenomenal. But Tracy Flick, what a character, and what a performance she gives here.
Totally indelible. Yeah, this is, I think, a masterclass in filmmaking. In fact, the film class that I took in LA, this is the movie that they made us watch.
Oh,
I had
cool.
not seen the movie before. And we studied a bunch of scenes, and because there's so much happening from like a filmmaking standpoint to, like you said, really sort of amp up the drama and the tension and the stakes. And once you start watching this movie, there's no way your head or your body can leave
right
where you're at. You know, it's just so captivating, and you're with these people, you're empathizing, you're scared for them, you're angry about them, all of it. Like, and his performance, of course, but it's also filmmaking in every aspect just had play. So yeah, great movie. To what you were saying earlier about the stakes are so high, I think that rings so true for me as well. Like, whatever stuff you're into just feels like a matter of life and death.
Right.
When you're doing it. And you know, everything you said about the empathy part, I wish I had watched this movie earlier. In fact, I feel like this movie should be like mandatory viewing for kids to have more empathy, and even adults for that matter, because we encounter people who are precocious and, you know, just sort of the cheerleader kind energy, which sometimes can be kind of annoying. But I think when you really peel the layers behind who this person is and get to know them for real, of course you'll connect with them, and of course you'll find something to empathize with. So yeah.
No, definitely. At the same time, you know, I don't want to give Tracy Flick too much, you know, credit either. Like, I definitely would have, like Matthew Broderick, there is something you kind of hate about those people too.
Yeah.
And that even though you understand where she's coming from and all that she's accomplished, but there's something that's still just like, so I definitely would have at the end. Like, I love that scene where he throws the milkshake at the car when he's just so angry that like she got what she wanted. And it didn't really like, you know, matter how she got there. And yeah, she stepped on some people and stuff, but I just think that character is just so well captured. And it is tough. Like you empathize with her, but at the same time, you still are mad at her too.
Still are mad at them.
Yeah.
But this is classic Alexander Payne, I think.
Yes,
you know, I think
true.
He's one of the masters at capturing such people who are essentially real people, right? People who are in the grave, which is practically everybody, that you root for them, but you also despise them on a certain spectrum, you know, no matter what that might be. So yeah, he's brilliant at that.
Yeah, totally, totally. Good shout out to him. I think maybe this is the first movie I think we brought up on the podcast so far from him, who's one of my favorite directors. So
Probably, yeah.
cool. Great. So now let's move on to your number two. Is it another Reese Witherspoon film, perhaps? Is this going to be an all Reese podcast?
No, could be. No, it's not. So my number two is Freaky Friday from 2003, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Lindsay Lohan, a bunch of other people as well, Mark Herman. Quick log line: an overworked mother and a daughter do not get along. When they switch bodies, each is forced to adapt to the other's life for one Freaky Friday. So I put this movie on my list for, I guess, two big reasons. One, a big part of my school life, at least, was very much intertwined with my family life, because at that age, you are living with your parents and, you're also becoming a young adult, and the lines between what happens at school, what happens at home are kind of blurry. So I wanted to capture, a movie and a time which sort of deals with that juxtaposition where these two worlds are sometimes colliding and sometimes in harmony. And I think this movie does a very good job of kind of depicting that. And the second reason is that I always connected with Jamie Lee Curtis in Lindsay Lohan's body person, because I was
you felt like an old soul inside of your
soul
body.
person, who had sort of, I mean, I don't know if I did, but at least I thought that I had my shit together, that I was disciplined, I wanted to be good at school, but in many ways I'm in awe of Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis's body. This person who's having fun, who's street smart, knows, what her power is, knows what the right thing to be said is. And ultimately, I think what the movie does is that you need a little bit of both, and that's sort of what makes you happy and successful as an individual, but also in this case for the mother-daughter relationship too. So I think it's a great kind of school movie. Obviously, you have all your regular, school tropes of the cliques and not fitting in and getting into trouble, the boys you meet, the crushes you have, all of that is happening on the side. But I think to me, the focus of this movie is really those two things. And what can I say? Like, both of these actresses are just amazing, especially Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, when I think of her, I think of this movie and I think of Eraser, which are sort of
True Lies. You mean.
True Lies. Thank you. I was like, but the moment I said that, I was like, something is wrong there. No, yeah, those two come to my mind always, and also Lindsay Lohan. Like, it's always a shame. I shouldn't say that, but I'm always sad when I watch this movie or even some of her earlier movies, like how amazing she was, what great screen presence, and kind of a natural talent, beautiful, all the things, and we all know, what's happened, but it sounds like she's doing a lot better. So that's good, so yeah. But yeah, all in all, very entertaining movie, super rewatchable. The whole gag of them switching bodies and the stuff in the Chinese restaurant, like it still cracks me up every single time. And it's very heartwarming and emotional too, because, it is really a mother-daughter or a child-parent relationship movie in that time when you are changing a lot as a school-going kid. So yeah, that's my number two, Freaky Friday.
Yeah, this is a movie I really enjoy too. When did you first see this? I'm just curious.
I want to say when it came out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, me too. I don't think I saw it. I definitely don't think I saw it in the theaters because I would have been in college. No, but I saw it pretty soon afterwards on home video. And
yeah, me too.
And really, this movie is very entertaining. Definitely to the credit of the two leads, like you said. I think they both do such a great job, have good chemistry with one another. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, even though she started out in horror and is sort of like known for that for the first part of her career, is such a good comedian. She got such good comedic timing, and her and Lohan work so well together. But yeah, I think the themes you hit on too were something I definitely felt, in high school, right? When you're still living at home and there is that home life, but then also the school life, and you're trying to keep them separate. but you can't really, and there's that, tension there, but sometimes it's helpful to have the two blending together. And I think this movie does a great job of capturing that too, and the problems that can start happening when you do blend those things together, like your crush falling in love with your mother, which is something that plot thread. It's like the writers, I feel like, wrote themselves into a corner of like, how do we get out of this? Where like this teen boy's in love with like the mom, and they kind of landed a little bit, but I feel like that was something that was a good idea and worked so well up to the point where like, well, now what do we do? Like, he can't just be still in love with the mom. But I thought that was fun to see, just to see where they were going with this. I'm like, I can't remember how you get out of this, and you don't really, but that's fine. But yeah, no, this is a great film. It's a classic, I think, of the body comedy or body switch comedy genre. I think this definitely is near the top, even better than the original Jodie Foster version. And then I think there was another remake on TV in like the 10 or so years later that I've never seen.
Never seen that one.
But yeah, no, it's a highly enjoyable film. Definitely recommend anyone who check it out. It's also funny too, just watching it now and how dated some of the high schools, like in terms of like the music and the clothing, and like it definitely was so much like in the early 2000s with all the pop punk thing and her like bleach streaks in her hair or whatever. I mean, it was definitely like pretty funny going back and seeing that. It's definitely dated in that way, but in a fun way dated. Like, I remember back to 2002.
I love that. I think that's one of my favorite things of watching movies from the past that are centered around like teens.
Yeah.
Because that's where you really get the time capsule-ness of fashion, what people were into, music, all of that. So it's so fun. And, we lived through that time, right?
Right,
so
right.
We sort of obviously have a personal connection to it, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it reminded me of the episode we recently did where you put American Pie in your list, and going back and watching that film, which I hadn't seen in 20 years. And that did capture so much of like the pop culture of that time, in a way that I was like, oh yeah, now I remember what it was like to live in 1999 a little bit. So this one, even though I wasn't in high school when this movie came out, I still was I was young enough in the pop culture to feel like kind of reminisce about, oh yeah, I remember when that was sort of like a trendy thing, to kind of be into. So it was a fun one. Thanks for putting this on the list. It was good rewatch.
Of course. All right. What is your number one?
So the number one film on my list that shaped my experience at school is another high school film, Rushmore from 1998. It's directed by Wes Anderson, starring Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray, Olivia Williams, and Brian Cox. Plot summary from IMDb. A teenager at Rushmore Academy falls for a much older teacher and befriends a middle-aged industrialist. Later, he finds out that his love interest and his friend are having an affair, which prompts him to begin a vendetta. So this film, for me, is number one, not only because it's one of my favorite films of all time and just a really important film to me just in terms of my life and my love of film, because I still remember seeing it in theaters at 15 and just the impact that it had on me then. But in terms of school, it really captures this feeling in high school that, I definitely felt, and I saw it around me too, where you kind of want to be an adult. You really want to grow up and you want to start acting like what you think an adult is, but you're still a kid. You're not an adult. You haven't gone through those things yet. You're not emotionally ready. You haven't gone through enough life experience. But it's that feeling where all you want to do, or at least I felt this in high school, is you want to be like, okay, now you're off, like you're growing up, you're close to 18, you're going to be leaving home soon. Like, I'm an adult. I want to be treated like one. So Max Fisher, who's the main character played by Jason Schwartzman, in many ways like a Tracy Flick-ish, in terms of just an incredibly well-written, well-rounded, one of the most interesting characters I've ever seen on screen. He is in this private all-boys prep school, and he dresses up even beyond his dress code. Like, the dress code is clearly just, slacks, khakis and a button-down shirt. He wears a jacket and a tie and the school emblem on there. So he's really trying
and a beret.
And a beret. Yeah, exactly. So he's trying to act so much and like put off this air of like, oh, I'm an adult now, and he's involved in all these clubs. So he's starting all these different things as the sort of like the head of this group. So he's being in charge of all this stuff. He's even acting like he's part of the administration sometimes, like he's design an aquarium that they're going to build. So he's there like at the groundbreaking as if he has any kind of power or control over any of this stuff. But he likes to think that he does. He has this air of importance about him. He puts on these plays that are incredibly mature, plays that, would be something you might find in high school or, postgraduate in terms of the topics they're dealing with. Not definitely a high school production, but he's, stretching for this. But at the same time, he's also like a terrible student. So he's behind all of this airs of being an adult. He's kind of, sacrificing both his academic future, but also you realize as the film goes on that he's doing this to kind of hide feelings of pain and isolation, probably driven by his mom's death that happened when he was very young. So he's sort of putting on this air of adulthood in the context of high school to hide like this personal pain that he hasn't yet got over. And the plot thread that they mentioned in the plot summary of him falling in love with having a crush on this teacher, again, is a way for him to act as an adult. Like she's, a young teacher. She's probably in her, late 20s or something, but he's, 15, 16. But he's trying to put on this air of, oh, no, we can totally date. Like, I'm an adult. This is fine. He goes to plans this big romantic dinner after one of his plays, and he thinks it's going to be some big adult moment for him. But when she brings a date, he throws a temper tantrum. Again, showing that he is still just a kid. Like, he's not actually the adult that
Luke Wilson again.
Oh yeah, Luke Wilson. And just this performance I do remember. But yeah, a lot of connections between our films so far. So yeah, I think, for me, I think what this movie does is really just captures as a high school student how you like to think of yourself as an adult, and you put in all these airs and even these external appearance things of like that you should be treated as an adult. But at the end of the day, like, you are just a kid. You still have a lot of growing up to do. And Max does do a lot of growing up in this film once he realized to accept himself for who he is. And that's a big character moments in here. But, something whereas when you graduate high school, I don't think you've still kind of found who you are. You're still growing and evolving. And I think that's what this film kind of shows, that you might say in high school what you kind of want to be, and you're putting that out there, but it's not really who you are, and you'll eventually find that. So also on another personal note, much like the Legally Blonde, where in terms of watching it film, I went, like I said at the beginning, to a all boys prep school in New England. And I remember them coming around the announcement was made at our lunch, because we all had to eat lunch together as a school. Hogwarts, like these big long tables. And they're like, oh, there's a movie that's coming out that they're looking to cast, young boys. It's gonna movie set in a prep school. They're basically doing a casting call for Rushmore, because they did a big, like, they're trying to find who to play Max Fisher and all the background actors and everything like that. So I'll always remember, I didn't know what it was at the time. Like, I remember, the name of the, like, I don't know what this is. And then I eventually saw the movie. It's like, oh crap. Like, I did not end up going to the audition. But no. I know. I could have been Jason Schwartzman, but I just always remember like having that connection to not only the filming, but then also the school. Like, again, all boys school, dress code, spanned 7th through 12th grade. Rushmore was, I think, started in kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. But that environment was something I was very used to. And that was what my high school was like. And I think this movie, just from a superficial standpoint or aesthetic standpoint, really captures what it's like to attend an all boys prep school in high school. So again, had to put this number one on my list for, those reasons, but mainly for this fact that, I definitely felt as when I was in high school that, I was an adult, I'm ready for this, but you're not. You're definitely not.
That's amazing. I didn't know that you went to a prep school like that. So that's good to know. Yeah, this is, obviously a classic. As you were talking, I was thinking about this, that it's funny that Jason Schwartzman's character is acting like the adult, but the adults in the movie are actually acting like children.
Right. Well, Bill Murray's character specifically.
All of them,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like Max's father, he's doing his best, but he's also an enabler in many ways for Max's, craziness. And even Olivia Wilson's character, even she, like, you're an adult. She tries to kind of, put him at bay when he's trying to make, advances towards her. But once again, it's kind of done in a very mixed messagey, not in a super clear, accountable way like an adult would, where somebody would sit this kid down and say, no, what you're doing is actually inappropriate. So it's sort of interesting how all of that is sort of lopsided. But that's the point of the movie,
Yeah,
It
definitely.
can be a little cringy. Often this movie's the interactions that he's having with the two adults and how the three have kind of become best friends. And
Mhm.
I mean, if you start to really analyze and think about this movie, it can be quite weird and cringy. But that's, I think, is what's Wes's genius, is that he deals with these topics like another director with the same subject. This is a very dark movie,
Mhm.
but this is not a dark movie,
Right.
and he sort of is able to handle those nuances, very beautifully. And like you were saying earlier about Tracy Flick as well, that you do develop empathy for
Mhm.
Max Fisher. I mean, we covered Lady Bird in our last episode. I prefer Lady Bird as a character to Max Fisher.
Mm.
I think Max Fisher to me is the more annoying one.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm the
That
exact opposite. I
exactly,
have
I
no
know.
empathy for Lady Bird,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I'm the opposite. Like
yeah,
for a
yeah,
while, I was like, okay, I can't really. This is just too much with the
yeah.
beret and all your clubs and all the things. Like I'm gonna come and slap you at some point. But as the movie goes on, you do develop empathy for him, and I love the him and Margaret and that whole angle because he
Hmm.
finally meets somebody who calls him out. Like she's the adult in the entire picture.
Hmm.
That what are you doing? And you hurt me, and you're horrible.
Hmm.
So I do like those final moments, just the way you like the final moments of Lady Bird.
Yeah,
I mean, I love this movie too. Like
yeah, yeah.
it's beautifully made and it's kind of brilliant. But yeah, great to see it on the list.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting too, that with election where it felt very realistic. Like it felt like you're in a high school.
Yeah,
And here it does. I mean, it's Wes Anderson, and it's not as extreme as he might get in some other movies
right.
in terms of the whole music box aesthetic. But it is very. You can tell it's a film. It's not meant to be
Yeah, it's
something that's a
heightened.
capture. That's heightened. So I think that helps with a lot of the interesting kind of again, like a 15-year-old hanging out with this 55-year-old industrialist guy. Like it all does seem kind of weird, but in the context of this fake universe that he kind of is creating, you question that a little bit less
Yeah,
versus an election. Obviously the relationship that Tracy has with one of her teachers is it feels very gross and weird and wrong because it is,
yeah.
because the movie's shot like, I mean, obviously that crosses lines that Max Fisher never does. But it is just interesting comparing this to, I think Wes gets away with a lot because of the aesthetic that he creates, which again, like I think just from a filmmaking standpoint, I mean the cinematic composition, the widescreen I mean the way that he stages some of these shots, you can tell every character's emotion, where they're coming from, what they're doing, just by looking at the frame and how they're moving around in the frame. It's fantastic. I actually hadn't seen this movie in about 10 years. I used to watch this like almost on a weekly basis as
Oh
a high
wow.
school and college kid. Like this is like my favorite movie for a very, very long time. And it was just interesting coming back to it and actually seeing a lot of, I was able to look beyond the Max Fisher character, which I identify with so much that was the movie was basically just him to me. And now watching it, I could sort of see, oh yeah, Murray and Olivia Williams, they're both just as damaged. And I think it's all
Yep.
just about damaged people and how they relate to that. Max covers that up with being an adult. And I think you're right. Like the adults cover their damage up by kind of acting like children and being immature and doing things that adults really aren't supposed to do. So just, yeah. Anyway, great film. I really, really enjoy it.
Really great film. Great soundtrack too, by the way.
Yes. Oh,
I
yeah.
ended up sort of putting a lot of the songs that I was listening on while watching the movie this time on my playlist. I was like, oh, these are some really, really good songs.
Yeah, I mean, Wes does such a great job
Always.
of putting music in his films, and I think this might be the best example of that too. But
Totally. Yeah. He's such a curator, in the true sense of that word across the
totally,
board.
yeah,
So
great songs.
yeah. Okay. Speaking of songs and music,
Yes.
my number one is Sing Street from 2016, directed by John Carney, starring Frida Walsh Pilo, Jack Renoir, Aidan Gillian. Quick logline: a boy growing up in Dublin during the 1980s escapes his strained family life by starting a band to impress the mysterious girl he likes. So I put this movie on my list because this movie really captures this theme that we've been talking about, is that when you're in school or even in high school, so much of your life is about finding your passions and the people that band with you in those
Mm-hmm.
passions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I really connect with that. Like for me, music was my thing. So I was part of the music club whatever school I went to. And like I said, I moved around a lot. So my immediate entry point into any new school and new city that I showed up in was through the music club at that school. And then in college, in addition to all the music stuff, I was also the co-chair of our magazine and did a whole bunch of sort of intercollegiate sort of festivals across, whether it's science projects or debates or dramatics. I was always in the scene sort of doing a lot of stuff. I was not the founding member of these things the way Max Fisher is, but I was very much involved, and this
Uh-huh.
was serious. Like these people and us, like we spent nights like rehearsing and really putting our heart and sweat and blood and energy, tears even,
Hmm.
who gets to sing what song and who's representing the school or the college in what festival. Like all of this stuff really mattered. So I think this movie really captures that how this boy who doesn't come from a very happy home but finds
Hmm.
these other kids in a very organic way. And I love those initial like 20-30 minutes of how they are forming their friendship over
Yeah.
their shared love of music, and shooting these DIY music videos. It's just so charming. And of course I wasn't doing that at that level. I wish I was, but it brings a smile on my face. And then of course them meeting this girl and how he falls in love with her, and the music and the shooting of the music videos is all sort of part of it. And in a way he finds his voice and a bit of a safe haven
Mhm.
through music and through these friends. So yeah, that's what this movie always stands for. It's also a very powerful sibling movie. Like the scenes that
Oh
he and his
yeah.
brother have, like when I watched this movie in the theater, I was bawling towards the end for sure, because he has this sort of older brother to look up to who's distant, but when they finally start to connect in a real way, that's such a big part of the movie.
Hmm.
Great music. I mean, John Carney obviously knows what he's doing when it comes to music. You're transported back to this time. So yeah, a very enjoyable movie, but with just a lot of heart. I could go on and on about this movie. So that's Sing Street at my number one.
Yeah, I'm glad you put this on the list. I actually, as someone who loved John Carney's Once so much, one of
Yeah.
my favorite films we've talked about already. I've actually never seen a single one of his other films, which is weird. So I'd never seen this before, and I thought it was fantastic. I think just from a school standpoint, especially like the first 20 minutes of him kind of getting taken out of his current school and moved to a new one, and how he kind of adapts in
Hmm.
that. When
Oh,
I
that
was
too, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you related to that a lot with
Yeah.
changing schools all the time. And I only had to deal with that once where my parents took me out of public school and put me into private school in sixth grade in a school where like that was the last year. So there's kids who had been together for, 7 years or whatever, they're graduating. I'm this new kid thrown in right at the last minute and just like what that feels like. I think this
Yeah.
captures a lot of those feelings. So I thought that, yeah, the beginning was great of how he finds his group of guys, and they're also funny and like love, again, all love this music that is this like early 80s kind of like British post-punk, like romantic kind of movement stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I love that. And you're right about the brother relationship thing was just fantastic. I mean, I'm the eldest. I don't have an older sibling or older brother or anything like that.
Me
But
too.
just that speech that he gives about like, look, I went there, I made the path so that you could then get your dream. Is just such a powerful, powerful moment. And I was not expecting that character to be who he, like in the beginning, he's sort of making fun of his brother and like kind of
Yeah.
seemed like the dropout, like fail son, basically. And then you realize there's so much more to him, and how he really inspires his brother so much to get into this music and to pursue his dream, because he realizes that's his role. As the older brother, like he put the path there, and he's gonna has to push his younger brother off to fill his dreams, whereas
Yeah.
he isn't, his dream, I guess, is to help his brother in a way. It's not to necessarily succeed on his own. But
And he's also being a bit of a parent because the
yeah,
parents are kind of out of the picture and
right.
they have so much of their own stuff to deal with.
Hmm.
But yeah, I love those scenes when you need these truth tellers in your life, especially in that time
Yep.
when you can almost sort of start posing in a way that, oh, I'm into this music, but you haven't really put in the time to
Right.
understand it, because how could you're
Hmm.
young, right? So I
Hmm.
think those dialogues when he's telling him that, watch this, listen to this, like this, if you're really into it, like live it, breathe it, like really important. So I didn't have that, but I was happy to, just vicariously live through those moments.
Yeah, totally. This is also a genre film that I really like too. It's the putting a band together genre of like how bands form, and then I just love those types of films, and this is a great job of capturing that, especially just a unique way of capturing it too, because these are all like high school students. This isn't a real band. It's not really about necessarily their band becoming big and like now they're on the cover of whatever, they're on the top of the pops. No, it's like how they're growing up and they're being they're learning about friendship and themselves and love, and like he's doing it for this girl, and then it's more about him leaving home and graduating and going off with who he loves to kind of pursue his career, and less about the band making it, which that was a interesting difference of that genre, which again I do like so much. So yeah, this movie I thought was super charming, great music like you said, really fun watch, fantastic acting across the board from all the young actors. I mean, I just love when a movie casts so many young characters and all the actors are just on the top of their game. It was great. It had a lot of good chemistry. And yeah, I thought this movie was very charming, and thank you for putting it on here. Now I can say I've seen 2 John Carney films. I have to go back and see some other ones.
I liked Once, but this is probably my favorite of his because it sort of really rang true. And I mean, I used to listen to this music all the time after
it's great soundtrack.
Great soundtrack. This guy, the lead, was in Coda.
Oh, really?
Guy, yeah.
Oh.
Who she's fallen for.
Oh, okay.
All grown up. So
oh, wow.
Happy to see him there.
Nice.
Because he was so good in this movie.
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic.
I'm sure he did other stuff, but I hadn't seen him in anything since. So when I saw him, he has a very interesting name. And I mean, more power to him that he didn't change his name.
Yeah,
so, stick to your guns.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool.
All right. So any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I got a couple honorable mentions of so there's a college films like 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, Animal House. I just feel like that one I have to put in there because it's a classic. In terms of high school films, Dead Poet Society, which we already talked about, was very similar to my school, as well as film School Ties, Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire, and then my perennial favorite movie I'll bring up on every episode, Pitch Perfect.
Yes.
What about you?
No, Pitch Perfect, Dead Poet Society, School Ties, they were all on my list as well. Also Boyhood, which we talked about once before, in a different kind of context of moving around and joining different schools. That really rings true with me. There's a movie called Edge of 17
yes,
with Harry Steinfeld, which I thought was really, really well done. Like one of the better like teenage focused movies in the last like 10, 15 years or so. So yeah, that was my list.
Cool. Well, hopefully everyone listening, you guys enjoyed the discussion of these films, maybe thought back to your high school or college or grad experiences. And maybe there's some new movies you're going to check out too to help relive some of those days. But we thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. Like I said, please do subscribe, leave us a review and a rating on your podcast platform of choice. And it definitely does help us get a growing audience. Tell your friends about us, tell your former classmates or teachers if you're still in contact with them about this particular episode. And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.